Do not enjoy meat and fish foods. The 6 evil deeds taught in this booklet. We have additional notes for your teachers and Buddhists to discern. Why do non-Zong monks consume animal food? Did the Buddha allow monks to consume animal food? To answer these questions and shed light on Buddhism. The non-Zong monks did not know which of the Buddha's teachings to dare to use animal flesh. Venerable ladies and gentlemen, teachers and Buddhists, please reread the 55 Javaka Sutra in the Central Sutra, Volume 2, page 71, Tibetan Sutra of Vietnam, translated from Pali to Vietnamese by Venerable Min Chau. In this sutra, the first passage of the Buddha taught the monk not to use animal flesh to see, hear and doubt. O Javaka, I say that in 3 cases, animal flesh is not used, seeing, hearing and suspecting. In the sense of this passage, when a bhikkhu sees the food offered by Buddhists containing the flesh of living beings, it is not eaten, which is the first case. When the food offered by Buddhists does not see the flesh of living beings, but hears others say that in that food, there is flesh of living beings, it is not eaten, which is the second case. When the food offered by Buddhists does not see meat and also does not hear that there is meat of living beings, but the mind is born suspicious that this food has flesh of living beings, because it has a fishy smell, it is not eaten, it is the third case. Judging by the above 3 cases, it is clear that the Buddha did not forbid eating the flesh of living beings, but only advised the bhikkhus to be aware of the suffering of living beings without eating meat. Being aware of the suffering of living beings without eating meat means exercising compassion for living beings, which means living in accordance with the virtuous ethics. There is a prohibition, i.e. a prohibition, a precept that there is a compulsion not to eat the flesh of living beings, which means fasting, but that fasting is fasting in the style of Mahayana Brahmanism, fasting due to the precepts. Theravada Buddhism, on the other hand, only uses virtues, does not prohibit but only advises monks how to self-consciously eat in order to show the true compassion of compassion. The first and second cases are obvious, and the third case is suspicious, it seems, but actually the flesh of living beings has their foul fishy smell, although we do not see, do not hear, but the smell of fish is not fishy, the smell of beef is not foul of beef, the smell of pork is not smelly of pork, the smell of chicken is not fishy chicken, etc. All animal flesh has its own smell, how can we not suspect, but doubt, not be allowed to eat, for our conscience and love, not to feed our lives by the suffering of other animals? Buddha taught a second time, Hey Javaka! I say in 3 cases when meat is consumed, do not see, do not hear and do not doubt. Perhaps, based on this teaching, Theravada monks use logic to justify their criminal actions. Not seeing means not seeing people killing animals to make offerings to themselves. Not listening, meaning not hearing the cry of the animal when it is killed to make offerings to you. Unsuspecting means seeing animal food offered by Buddhists without suspecting that people are killing animals to make offerings to themselves. Therefore, in the Javaka Sutta there are opening and closing parentheses, killing for oneself. These 4 words were added by later people to satisfy the greedy desire to eat living beings. In the past, the patriarchs had nothing they did not dare to do. They added and subtracted a lot from the Theravada scriptures. Today, too, they also dare to reason and distort the Buddha's teachings, sometimes to protect their honor, while violating the precepts, and sometimes, because they do not understand the method or because they have not attained enlightenment in their practice. If the sutta ends here, it will be difficult for us to clarify Buddhism. But the sutta continues to teach the second and third parts, so we can clearly see the unwholesome face and greed of the Theravada monks who skillfully added and reasoned and distorted the Buddha's scriptures to cause harm. This is a heinous crime, so all Theravada Buddhist lands practice to no avail, enter into crazy vipassana wisdom and practice incorrectly in the 4 foundations of mindfulness and the 4 noble concentrations of Buddhism, splitting the practice of the 4 foundations of mindfulness into pieces. This is the school of Zen practice of the foundations of mindfulness. This is the Zen school of mindfulness and mindfulness. This is the Zen school of Thonim Su. Splitting the 4 foundations of mindfulness dharma into pieces like that, but also shouting loudly, writing scriptures to disseminate everywhere, makes later people misunderstand the Buddha Dharma, practice wrongly, and cannot solve birth, old age, and death. illness, death. Meanwhile, the 4 foundations of mindfulness Dharma is very wonderful. If you practice you will see immediate results, if you practice you will have inconceivable transcendent powers. Due to the division of the 4 foundations of mindfulness Dharma, Theravada monks practice nowhere, only wandering around in meditation, never achieving the liberation of Buddhism. In countries that follow Theravada Buddhism and take Buddhism as the national religion, every young man of the right age must go to a temple to practice for 3 years. If anyone wants to practice, they can stay and continue practicing. If they don't want to practice, they must go forth. Zut Fat means being born, returning to secular life, and getting married. But, these young men, who practiced Buddhism without any compassion at all, dared to wield knives, guns, and weapons to destroy their people, such as killing pigs, chickens, goats, etc. Because, if you practice and eat living beings, you will become a devil, but you cannot become a Buddha. The Javaka Sutta taught by the Buddha is like that, but the southern sect patriarchs dare to invent and eat 5 impure things. It's heartbreaking. Why so? Because Theravada Buddhist monks eat living beings. Their minds are very cruel. Their monastic life is contrary to the Buddhist morality of not causing suffering to oneself, to others, and to all sentient beings. Buddhism is human morality. How can human morality be cruel enough to eat living beings without any love? So, are these monks Buddhist monks or not? Please answer. Also in that sutta, the Buddha continued to teach the bhikkhus not to eat the flesh of living beings, by practicing and cultivating the 4 immeasurable minds. The sutta continues, Hey Javaka! A bhikkhu who lives in a village or a town must always practice his mind to pervade the same direction with kindness and abiding in it, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th directions and throughout the world above and below the surface. Horizontal, all directions, and boundless, his mind is pervaded and accompanied by boundless and generous compassion, without hatred, without anger, and dwells in peace. With the meaning of this sutra passage, when a bhikkhu eats and drinks, he must observe all aspects of his food, and at the same time have compassion for all living beings. If he sees the meat of living beings, he would rather die than die. Don't eat. That is to practice the way of compassion and love for one's life. The teachings are so clear, yet the Theravada monks have the heart to eat meat. We feel sorry for them. Just one lifetime of practice is of no benefit to themselves or to all of us. Born. In this sutra, the Buddha clearly defined, a Buddhist monk must always practice the 4 immeasurable minds. A person who has practiced the 4 immeasurable minds has no heart to eat the flesh of living beings. Is that right, guys? Yet the Theravada monks can still swallow the flesh of living beings, which is truly amazing. As for the bhikkhus, the Buddha taught not to eat the flesh of living beings with 2 wonderful teachings. 1. Eating the flesh of living beings who cannot see, hear, or suspect. 2. Eat the flesh of living beings with compassion everywhere in the 10 directions, up and down. In the same sutra, the Buddha taught lay people to offer food to the Buddha and the Sangha, Hey Javaka! Whoever for the sake of the Tathagata or for the sake of the Tathagata's disciples kills living creatures as food offerings, that person accumulates a lot of non-merit due to 5 causes. When he said the following, go and bring this beast here. That is, the first reason is that the person has a lot of non-merit. When that animal was being led and pulled around its neck, it felt pain and suffering. That is, the second reason is that the person accumulates a lot of non-merit. When he said, go and kill this beast. That is the third reason, that person accumulates a lot of non-merit. When that animal is killed, the person feels immense pain and suffering. This is the fourth cause, the person accumulates a lot of non-merit. When that person makes offerings to Tathagata or Tathagata's disciples in an illegal way. That is, the fifth reason, that person accumulates a lot of non-merit. Through this sutra passage, we see very clearly that the Buddha taught lay people very carefully not to offer animal food to the Buddha and the Sangha. Because such offerings are illegal offerings, have no blessings, harm virtue, and are a serious crime because of killing living beings. A very valuable sutra for Theravada monks. The Javaka article in the Majjhima Nikaya affirms that Buddhist monks are not allowed to eat the flesh of living beings, so they should eat plant foods with the purpose of cultivating their hearts of love, compassion, joy, and equanimity to separate themselves from desire and evil. Makes the body and mind pure, can enter all kinds of meditation, and master the cycle of life and death. On the contrary, a monk who still eats the flesh of living beings means that his mind has not been separated from desire and evil has not left. It is very wasteful for a life of practicing Buddhism, but not enjoying the liberation of Buddhism, but also falling into hell. Hell here is not hell, but a state of suffering of the body or afflictions of the mind. If you practice and still have such an evil mind, you will be in debt to your alms donor forever and ever. Currently, Theravada monks eat and drink for pleasure, have fat bodies, and rely on evil deeds to support their lives. This life must endure countless sufferings, because they have brought into their bodies the sufferings of sentient beings. How can we avoid that suffering? Note. Reading the Javaka Sutta, we comment on Buddhism. Buddhism is a self-reliant religion, teaching humanistic ethics, very practical and specific cause and effect. Therefore, Buddha is a psychologist who understands everyone's emotions, thoughts and aspirations. Therefore, his teachings are all about human morality. Because it teaches human ethics, it talks about human psychology very deeply. 1. Teach lay people not to do evil occupations to avoid bad consequences such as accidents, illness, premature death, etc. 2. Teach the monks not to eat the flesh of living beings by being thoughtful and careful in every bite they eat with a great love for all living beings. 3. Teach Buddhists not to offer meat to living beings as food for Buddha and the Sangha. Making offerings like that is illegal and non-merit, no blessings, but more sins. The Buddha's entire teachings, from the beginning good, the middle good, to the end good, he teaches people how to live in good dharma, prevent and end evil dharma. Therefore, from the very first step, the Buddha taught lay people not to do the 6 evil occupations as mentioned above. The Buddhist way of practice is very specific. Here, teachers and Buddhists must understand clearly that changing careers, not doing bad jobs anymore means practicing, cultivating means correcting, changing, doing good again, and not tormenting yourself. Suffering for people and suffering for sentient beings, rather than sitting there banging on a gong, chanting sutras, reciting Buddha's name, praying rosary, sitting in meditation or bowing to the holy name to repent to eliminate sins and enjoy blessings, etc. Don't misunderstand the practice instructions of scholars of some sections. When practicing, you must meditate, enter retreat, chant sutras, repent, recite Buddha's name, recite mantras, transmit mind seals, and chant. Shout, hit, and push to realize Buddha nature. That is, the form of practice that is influenced by other religions does not help us liberate our minds from greed, anger, ignorance, afflictions, love, hate, anger, resentment, jealousy, or suspicion, taboo, and other evil deeds. The way of practice taught by Buddhism and Theravada scriptures is more practical and specific, with immediate results when starting to practice, unlike the practices of scholars who teach according to the development scriptures of a Buddhist monk. Denomination number. As mentioned above, when you change an evil job to a good job, you do not cause suffering to sentient beings. Do not cause suffering to sentient beings, that is, you do not cause suffering to yourself. Do not cause suffering to yourself, that is, you do not cause suffering to yourself. Rescue. Teaching people not to do evil deeds. Not to do evil deeds means cultivating goodness, friends. Do you understand this? Teaching people not to offer food with the bones and blood of living beings means creating karma for the body to have fewer illnesses and a longer life. Teaching monks not to eat the flesh of living beings is to cultivate the mind of love, compassion, joy, and equanimity to counteract greed, anger, ignorance, selfishness, pettiness, etc. In this sutra, teachers and Buddhists should pay attention to the Buddha's teachings. Eating the meat of living beings must not see, not hear, and not doubt. This teaching means that when eating and drinking, you must cultivate your eyes and ears, be attentive and careful, and when eating and drinking, you must clearly know that the food you are eating contains bones and blood and the death and suffering of living beings in the world. that or not? If so, we would rather die within Buddha's precepts than break the precepts by eating. Why so? Because Buddhist monks often cultivate in their minds a great love for all sentient beings, for humanity in all 10 directions of the world. If we only want to fatten up this impermanent and impure body and chase after sensual pleasures and the delicious illusion of taste, then we are not truly compassionate Buddhist monks. Buddhism follows a vegetarian diet because of boundless love for sentient beings. On the contrary, in this world there are vegetarians who do not eat the flesh of sentient beings, but make food that resembles the meat of living beings. That is vegetarianism in the ordinary style. Being vegetarian still craves meat, so they create vegetarian food that resembles the meat of living beings. Like food and meat for living beings to eat to relieve cravings. The Buddha did not accept this kind of vegetarian diet. True Buddhist practice, doing good deeds, comes from a good heart, being vegetarian because of true compassion for sentient beings, so we cannot bear to eat the flesh of living beings. Fasting is only because of fear of hell, fear of impermanence demons, yiksha demons tormenting, burning, stabbing, cutting tongues, gouging out throats, pulling out tendons, etc. Fasting to pray for rebirth in ultimate bliss, heaven, etc. Fasting to pray for disaster recovery, illness elimination, longevity, etc. Buddhism does not accept such vegetarianism because it is not a practice for liberation. It is a type of vegetarianism to comfort the spirit. Such vegetarianism is like a cow eating grass, it has no Buddhist meaning. Liberate all.